What happens when the DM becomes a cult leader? Let me describe the situation. Dungeons & Dragons is the best hobby in the world. With the right DM and nice enough players, you can go from strangers to best friends in a matter of hours. D&D puts aside social barriers. It lets you disregard the ways that the real world ties you down to the limitations of gender, age, race, and ability. For a few hours, when everyone's schedules align, you get to create something and become part of something truly special. But by reading this subreddit, you already know that this isn't always the case. I am a forever DM in my late 30s with over 20 years of experience DMing. I've seen a lot of mistakes and made many more myself, but the one thing I can say with confidence is that I can run a fine game of D&D. I've learned to play to my strengths. I'm a great DM, but I don't think I'm a good player. Maybe I could learn to be one. I enjoy the occasional one-shot, but whenever I try to play a long campaign, I start getting triggered. Start bringing up bad feelings through my character and sabotaging the game. Switching characters constantly, and making questionable life choices. This is part 1 of the story of how I got burned, and why I chose to become the Forever DM. Why for me, the DM screen is a shield, not just to ensure everyone has fun, but because I feel the need to be empowered, to spot the warning signs and ensure nothing like what happened to me ever happens to my players, or to anyone else ever again. I was a homeschooled kid, somewhere on the shallow end of the autistic spectrum. I grew up in a hippie family in a house with no running water or electricity when we weren't driving around Australia in a combi van. And for several formative years, in the untamed majesty that is the island nation of Papua New Guinea, I learned to read before I learned to talk properly, and stories were my life in lieu of friends my own age. When my family came back to Australia and I finally started school, I had none of the social skills that a teenager required, and I had a really bad time. I adored Steven Jackson and Ian Livingstone fighting fantasy books and choose your own adventure novels, even learning a programming language to make text adventure games of my favorites. So when I saw 2 classmates poring over the Rifts rulebook, I was intrigued. Soon after, I played my first game of D&D. The DM and other players tolerated me at best, often complaining that by hanging around them, I was making them less popular by association. But my dwarf fighter rounded out the party. The games were basic, the story almost non-existent, but I was hooked. Then my sister developed cancer. She's fine now, but we had to move cities to be closer to the hospital. Our neighbor had a grandson a year older than me, and he was the worst person I have ever met in my whole life. Let's call him Richard. We both played D&D, and he was willing to DM me. We started playing every free moment, just me and him. My whole life, I wanted a friend. Now I had one, and our friendship coupled with my love of stories. I was so grateful for his friendship that I would do anything for him. Richard was an only child, and coming from a very strict family, I was amazed at how he spoke to his parents, and how they couldn't discipline him. Clearly, I figured, he had something special. He was also an amazing artist. It took half a decade before I learned he traced all his art from tattoo magazines. He also came up with the most incredible stories on the fly. Little did I know he was taking advantage of the fact that I had not been allowed to watch TV growing up, and to this day I am still discovering plots he stole from old movies and TV shows. He also had few friends, having a reputation of being a psychopath. He had so many stories about flying into rages and attacking his bullies. I had never stood up to my tormentors, so I basically worshipped the ground he walked on. Here was my brother in arms, my best friend forever. Or so I thought. Do you know that trope from old 90s movies like Back to the Future or Beverly Hills Cop, where the hero achieves victory by being the best liar? That is, until his conscience inevitably gets him into trouble. I truly believe that Richard based his personality on those movies, but reasoned that if you didn't have a conscience, you wouldn't run into trouble. Taking cues from the pyramid scheme his parents were heavily invested in, his ambition in life was to be a cult leader. Subtly, he started to abuse my trust and used our friendship to dominate me. It started with pouring him drinks and fetching things for him, but over the years, it escalated to the point where he would openly call me his slave. D&D was a focal point for the brainwashing. I now realize I played good aligned characters who wanted to save everyone. He made sure that no matter what I did, my morality was constantly exposed as hypocritical, or I was directly responsible for the deaths of innocents. The fact that I preferred to play female characters gave him more ammunition to degrade me for his entertainment. He used a carrot and stick method. He'd give me an amazing adventure where I'd get to make friends, save the town, and get amazing loot. I played this awesome human female fighter who rolled the most amazing stats I've ever seen. To this day, I remember them. 18 strength, 17 dexterity, 18 constitution, 16 intelligence, 15 wisdom, and 17 charisma. The look on his face when I rolled them right in front of him was pure jealousy. After a few adventures, I had saved my hometown twice, had a cool bard companion with lots of custom spells, a dinosaur mount, and magic full plate that let me pass through stone. Best character ever. Then, tired of the carrot, he switched to the stick. On aboard a sea voyage, there was a werewolf loose on the ship. I had to get everyone to safety while figuring out who the werewolf was. I ended up cornering the werebeast, and it swore to the gods it would never hurt another soul if I let it go. Being incredibly kind-hearted, I decided to give it a chance. I left it in the hold of the ship, making sure the passengers had silver weapons in case it turned, and went up to the deck of the ship to make sure there were no other dangers. Richard said, "You hear something from below deck. It's probably nothing." That was his way of telling me he decided to punish me by having the werewolf kill everyone on board, including my bard friend and dinosaur mount, then scuttled the ship. No chance to intervene, just, "It's probably nothing." The ship sank, and I had to abandon my armor or drown. In one fell swoop, I had nothing. I kept playing the character because I was so invested, and I kept hoping the bard had survived, searching for him. I gained a few levels, but no loot to speak of, and I ended up traveling forward into the future where the werewolf I spared had raised an army and killed all life on Earth, and it was all my fault. My character became depressed to the point of suicide, so Richard gave me a heap of potions that have a 50-50 chance to either increase or decrease your stats by 1d6 point each. Looking back, I think he was trying to take away the only thing I had left, those amazing stats I rolled. But I rolled amazingly and ended up with all my stats at the level of a god. We agreed I became a god, but at the last minute, he decided it was the god of bumblebees, the weakest and most pathetic thing he could think of at the time. Later, I asked him to retcon the last session because I just wanted to play my character again. He said that if I paid him real money, he would let me get the chance to get all my cool stuff back from the first sessions again. Like an idiot, I did, and I played that character one last time. He had me meet a leprechaun who offered me 3 wishes. I wished for every innocent killed as a result of my actions to come back to life. Then I wished for all my loot back. And finally, I wished for some minor cosmetic improvements to my armor that I thought looked cool. The leprechaun congratulated me on my excellent wishes, and because they were so well thought out, he offered me 1 more wish. I couldn't think of anything else I wanted, but it felt like a waste if I didn't wish for something, so I wished for world peace. "You got greedy," Richard exclaimed with glee, and described how all my previous wishes were undone, and I was teleported naked to a frozen mountaintop where I began to freeze to death. I didn't die, because if I did, he couldn't torment me anymore. But I never played that character again. My next character was a female drow assassin with 20 dexterity. If I was punished for being good, I could roll with the punches. In the first adventure, I was almost crushed to death by a boulder, blinded with a bright light, and inappropriately assaulted by guards, had my limbs broken, stabbed repeatedly, lost all my equipment, and all my wounds became infected. I was then forced into becoming a love slave to pay back the cost of healing and to earn money for new weapons and armor. I didn't give up though. Once I was able to earn enough, I spent my money very wisely and readied myself for all sorts of dangers. For the next adventure, he had me board a ship, and you guessed it, it sank and I lost all my equipment. But I fought hard and managed to keep hold of my weapons and armor, stranded on a jungle island and hunted by pirates. I started making extreme tactical use of my racial spells and agility to pick them off one by one, and I was winning. Then, Richard decided he was tired of that game. By this point, my relationship with Richard was escalating into a full-on cult situation. I could write a whole other story about that, but let's just say he claimed he could see the future, and that the world would end on January the 29th, 1999. So there was no point in studying at school or developing useful life skills. that my family was all going to die, so I needed to distance myself from them because only he could help me. Then he started telling me to draw magic symbols on my face because the reason everyone hated me was because I had a demon inside me. He also started arranging for me to get beaten up every lunchtime at school, while he would sit and watch and laugh. That was roughly the edge of the iceberg of how bad it had gotten. The sadism he exhibited towards my D&D characters was preferable to the sadism he played out in real life. My D&D characters quickly became nasty anime protagonist edgelords, and I pored over rulebooks for optional rules I could loosely interpret to give me an unfair edge in making the most awesome, most tragic backstoried, katana-wielding dark elf I could muster. Points-based class options let me build characters that were immune to non-magical weapons, and I could cast 9th level spells at 1st level. Birth defect charts had me breathing water and flying. Deliberate misreading of skills had me jumping 30 feet straight up from a standing position and running over enemies' heads to unleash the ill-defined hidden power I insisted be included. I became that guy. In later high school, we started playing a larger game with some skater guys, and it quickly became apparent I was hogging the spotlight in a major way. Richard told me I wasn't allowed in the game anymore because I was a power gamer and wasn't fun to be around. He emphasized that it wasn't his choice, but the others in the game had put their foot down. I rang one of them immediately, furious, and he made it very clear that yes, I was way too extra. But no such conversation had taken place, and Richard had made the whole thing up. He also told me about Richard tracing art. I started reining in my edgelord tendencies and remained friends with that skater guy to this day. Eventually, I found the rage and courage to expel Richard from my life, but it burned me hard, and I don't like to be a player or to trust people to this day. When I went to university and I saw the fraternities hazing their new recruits in cult-like humiliation games, it enraged me in ways I can't quite express. I studied the history of witchcraft, demonic possession, and various cult figures at uni, and learned a lot about myself as well as the world, and especially about Richard. In today's so-called post-truth world, I continue to study the power of belief and how cults of personality create competing realities across our political and social landscapes. So what happened to Richard after I ejected him from my life at sword point? Literally, he sent me a long email crying about how he didn't have many friends, about how he thought I always knew he was just making up having magic powers, and about how he did it all because he was jealous of me. Jealous of the fact that I had pale skin, was tall and blonde, got good grades at school, or I used to before he talked me into stop trying, and how I came from a better family. I drew an ASCII heart hand with a rude gesture accompanied by just as rude words beneath and hit send. The last I heard, he got beaten up for messing with underage girls, joined a weird Christian sect that speaks in tongues, studied to be a priest for a bit, then quit the church saying he never believed any of it anyway. So that's the story of my cult leader DM and how I became that guy. But the story doesn't end there. My family moved house again, within the same town, and by coincidence our neighbors were three brothers who also played D&D. What followed was some of the most toxic games I had ever been in, easily rivaling Richard's. I know this is a long one, but I think it's simply amazing to see all of what OP went through. Like I said before, some people love taking advantage of others, and psychopaths are no different. I really don't know what to expect in the next one, but buckle up, it's gonna be a long ride. What do you all think about this situation?